Hi, I'm Chris, aka The Philosopher's Games, and today we look into the second teaser trailer of Amazon's upcoming The Lord of the Rings of Power show coming in September. I already did a long livestream on that, and this here is supposed to be the short version. We will see how this works out, but I want to give you an overview and connect the dots to what Tolkien wrote in his books, and also give you a little breakdown of the trailer. I tried to freestyle this year, so before we start, a few hints. Amazon Brazil accidentally leaked the trailer of next week. I already saw it and I will ignore it here for the most part. I can't show any footage anyway because they will just claim everything that has a footage in it. So no chance here, but I will cover it next week in a stream anyway. Also, shoutouts to the artists who allowed me to use their fantastic artworks like Ted Naismith, Kimberly 80, Sara Morello, and all the others. Also, spoiler warning, and I try to pronounce names as Tolkien described it. But let us start. The teaser starts with this landscape mood shot, somewhat similar to what we saw in the first teaser, somewhere here. It's not the same landscape, I guess, but somewhat reminiscent it is still. And I can't tell you where it is in Middle-earth. It could be anywhere. It's of course filmed in New Zealand. But it gets more interesting if we get to this next scene here, where we see this landscape here, this body of water, maybe this river there in the background with this ruin, and the tower. And this is supposed to be Tir Harad. Tir means to watch or to watch over, Harad means south. Where it is exactly, I don't know, because it's a made-up place, it's not in the book. And south is of course a relative term in a way, because there are a lot of places that are south of all the known elven realms from the Second Age, and so it could be anywhere south of the Misty Mountains, I guess. And I have a theory where this tower might stand. We'll look into this in a moment. However, we see some ruins and a bridge here, and there are two people on the bridge, potentially going towards the tower. I'm not 100% sure if that's the case, but that's at least my impression. And this might be the Sylvan elf Arondir and his girlfriend Bronwyn. We also see later in the trailer, and we also see this tower later in the trailer, and we already know this particular screenshot from the Empire magazine where it was first published, and now we have it here with movement in the trailer. We see a little bird here at the side and some houses with smoke coming out. We know this from the analysis of the screenshot already, and Arondir standing here in the tower. Where this is exactly is, as said, difficult to say. I had a whole stream trying to find that out, and it was not really conclusive. I had like two main ideas that seemed very likely. First of all, here to the left we see mountains, and to the right we see mountains. So this can't be, for example, Eriador or Eregion. It would not make sense that way. My suggestions would be that this is here round about the Gap of Rohan, or Gap of Kalenarzon, as it's potentially called at some point in the Second Age. And the reason for that is that then we would have here the Misty Mountains to the left, and this here would be the White Mountains here to the right. And we also have this river, could be then the Isen, and if you know, potentially Isengard or Isengard, however you want to pronounce it, here could potentially be built later here somewhere, I guess. And these outlier mountains here, part of the Misty Mountains, if you look at the map, it kind of fits. It's not perfect, but maybe you can make an argument. Maybe it's also a bit too not wide enough for what we see on the map, but it's the best suggestion I have. Another one would be, it might be south of Mordor, just below it, and also maybe north of the land of Khand. But as said, hard to tell where it is exactly. We have some, as said, little details, like there is civilization with these houses and smoke coming out, and we have potentially a little bird flying here, which you only see if you see. It's really hard to see. And we move the footage a bit back and forward. And it is, of course, not Orthanc, the Tower of Isengard, because it is built out of an indestructible black stone. This tower here looks like it has seen better days. We also see this little door here put up, so that's the way how he got up there, I think. Quite fascinating. It seems also to have like an elvish design if we look at the carvings here of this top part. But yeah, not much else to say here. This is, though, according to the description of a screenshot, Tir Harad, whatever that is, wherever that is. Let's move on, let's move back in the trailer to this scene here, which is very interesting and a lot of lore details I have to unpack here, which I hope I can do at least reasonably fast. So we see a hobbit, his name is Sadok, his name was already mentioned also in some screenshots already, and an article of a magazine, I forgot which one it is, and he reads a book, and it is this book, and this is very fascinating. From the posters, we already know these symbols here, these pictograms, though I could not find out what it is. I looked into the so-called Goblin alphabet of Tolkien, and it looks too different for that. But we see some symbols that we know, like a little sun here, and maybe this is a half moon. Some interpret this like as a meteor, hard to say, maybe an eclipse here. And some symbols also appear multiple times. It could be like every symbol is a word, and it's not like a letter system, but it's pretty hard to tell, and I can't read it. I read the theory in, I think, a Discord or on Reddit, I'm not sure, but shoutouts to the person who came up with this, which I like quite a bit. And he basically says that if we look at closer to it, you see some stars here. And so maybe this here is the meteor then that we will see in a moment in the trailer. Maybe I can just jump to it, this one here. And this is maybe the sun. So it could be a certain star constellation with a meteor, and this is like a prophecy or like a hint. When you see this at the sky, something happens. And he also says in the moment, the skies are strange. And maybe he reads in this book about this and know what's going to happen or so. It is the theory, like a prophecy. I like that quite a lot, I have to admit, though I can't really tell you too much about it. There's, however, a lore implication that seems a bit contradicting to the books, or at least very unusual. Because if he is a hobbit, actually we don't know anything about the hobbits in the Second Age. They only appear in records of the elves and so on in the Third Age. If you don't know about the ages, there are multiple ages. The Lord of the Rings plays during the very end of the Third Age, and you know the prologue of the Lord of the Rings films of Peter Jackson. We see the Battle of the Last Alliance, which plays at the very end of the Second Age. It is 3,000 years before the Lord of the Rings. And the Second Age in of itself is also 3,441 years long. So this beginning of the Second Age and the ending of the Lord of the Rings are like 6,500 years apart, something like that. So it's just a really massive time span. So the problem with this is now that if we look further into some linguistic details of the hobbits, we notice that their last names often are derived from Old English. They are not actually Old English in the world, but Old English represents it, because The Lord of the Rings is written from the perspective of Tolkien finding the Red Book of Westmarch and translating it into modern English. And some of the older languages he replaced with real-world languages of old, like Old English, Gothic, Old Norse, and so on. So we find those. And the Hobbit names are Old English, and we also know that the ancestors of Rohan and also the people of Rohan themselves also had Old English names. And we also have implications in the book of itself that the people of Rohan in legends knew about the Hobbits. So they must have met at some point, and the Hobbits adopted their language. However, if they had a writing system on their own and books and records, it would be strange that they lost their original, maybe from the Second Age, Hobbit language in this way. It seems very strange. It doesn't make too much sense if you think about it. So either this is not a Hobbit language and he just found the book and he can, for whatever reason, read it and is maybe like a wise man among his folk, or if they have a Hobbit language and this is like a Hobbit prophecy of ancient times, then this would, in my opinion, definitely contradict the books though. Though I still have to admit, I kind of like what they did here with the symbols and the language. Looks kind of interesting and very unusual. So I'm a bit torn between these details. I hope I could explains this well enough in this short time frame. So let us maybe move on to the next scene. We see Sadok, Barrow is I think his name, and he's a hobbit, a half-foot. There are 3 types of hobbit breeds: the half-foots, the Sturs, Gollum for example is a Stur, and the Fellowhides. And the half-foots are mentioned the first in the records in 3rd Age 1050. That's also around the time when Sauron appears first in Dol Guldur, interestingly. However, he looks at the sky, and this is a very common theme in the trail that a lot of people look up, and then we often have a cut to this meteor scene. It might be pretty much always the same meteor scene, but it's, in my opinion, a very common theme. They potentially want to communicate, yeah, this meteor is kind of important for the story, or connects several parts of it. And that in of itself is strange, because meteors in the writings of Tolkien are pretty rare. I only know about one instance where a meteor or meteorite is actually mentioned, and that is in the First Age, and there an elf named Eol finds it, and it crashes on the ground, and then there's metal in it, and he extracts the metal and makes 2 legendary black swords out of it, and they are called Anguriel and Anglachel. And Anglachel is later reforged into the sword of Turin Turambar, which is like a very tragic figure of man from the First Age. I wouldn't call him a hero. He kind of is, he kind of is not. It's a difficult story, I guess. And he forges the sword Gurthang out of Anglachel. And yeah, it's a very powerful and legendary weapon, and it shatters at the very end. And some speculate that we also saw a screenshot with like a shattered sword, that this might be the sword of Turin, which in my opinion also would be pretty much over the top and against the law, what we know from the lore, though in theory it is possible to find it, I guess, but it's complicated. Like, he's buried at a specific place, and this place might have survived because everything else was just sunk into the ocean, and there's one island left where this might have been, and then they, in theory, could extract it from there. However, the implications in the lore regarding the sword are so big that I would prefer if they not touch it in the show. It would be better. Like, it's very deeply buried into Tolkien's mythology, if that makes sense. Next scene, we see High King Gil-galad. He's the High King of the Noldor elves. There are like 3 major elven clans in Tolkien's world: the Vanyar, the Noldor, and the Teleri. And he is the High King of the Noldor, a clan that's known for crafting, and they also pursue knowledge, and are also, let's say, they have some very interesting characters. Galadriel, for example, is also mostly considered a Noldor elf, though she's also half Teleri. The Teleri also split into several subclans, but that's a topic for a different video, I guess. What's interesting, he's golden, and I always imagined him silver, because in some of the sources he's described as having a silver mail, a silver shield, a silver helm, and the moonlight reflects from that, and you see it from afar, though it might be more his armor for war, I guess, and this is his casual clothes when he's at home, something like this. But I imagined him less golden, let's put it that way, because gold has a very bad tendency inside Tolkien's world, and I find it a bit unusual, though I still think it's fitting. In the books, we know it from The Nature of Middle-earth, which just came out last year, that he has silver hair, though, but I wouldn't consider this a big mistake, because dark hair is very common in this line of, or at least, let's say in parts, in some elven lines. So you could consider that he has black hair. I guess it was one of the theories always that he had silver hair. Complicated topic, not big of a deal. On his sash here we can read Aran Ainyor, and that means Elder King, and that is the name of the leader, the king of the Valar. The Valar are basically angels or spirit beings, like angels of highest rank, and they are, I wouldn't say the rulers of the world, but they are something like a god pantheon in the world, because they aren't gods. There's only one actual god in Tolkien's world called Eru Ilúvatar, and the Valar serve Eru, and there are also other spirit beings that serve these Valar, the Maiar, for example Gandalf, Radagast, Saruman, Sauron, the Balrogs, all of them are Maiar, and they are even more powerful. The master of Sauron was Morgoth, and he was also once called Melkor and one of the Valar, but he was kicked out of the club basically when he did very evil things. And yeah, he was the first Dark Lord, and he got bent and pushed into the void, and then Sauron became his successor. So there's that. Well, it makes sense because he's a high king, and kings always have this connection, authority sometimes that somewhat relates to God, if that makes sense. They have the authority given by God, and maybe it makes kind of sense that he has one of the highest entity in Middle-earth written on his sash as a high king, and on his sleeves, it's hard to see here, but in other screenshots you can see it better. There we find the writing Elbereth, which is a wife of the elder king Manwë, and his wife is also called Varda and Quenya. They have different names in different languages, and it makes sense for these highest entities to be written on the robes of a king, I guess. Seems unusual for a lot of people is that we see it written in dwarf runes, though the dwarf runes are actually Kirs, and in origin an elven writing system which the dwarves just adopted. So in case people wonder, why is it written in dwarf runes? It's not dwarf runes, it's Kirs, and it's in origin an elvish writing system. Though for a Noldor, I would expect Tengwar, to be honest, which we see on his spear. There's another screenshot, and I did a video about this in case you are interested. But whatever, let's move on. This scene was already in the first teaser. If you have not seen there, my breakthrough of that. Here's the first very new and cool scene that we see that I find highly interesting, but at the same time highly confusing. In of itself, if we look at this beautiful scene composition, we see the water, an ship, an elvish ship, and we see these white birds here. And white birds in Tolkien's universe in combination with elven ships make a lot of sense. If you see this artwork here of Ted Naismith, you see that these swans actually pull the ship, and this is described by Tolkien, and so it makes a lot of sense, though this is not the case here in this. It's hard to say if they just circle around the ship or fly, I don't know, with them or against them or away from them. Hard to tell. In the next scene, though, we see that these are elves due to the pointy ears. There's like a mention in a letter and in some of Tolkien's dictionaries that elves have pointy ears. So that's definitely a thing. And they look at something, and we see a light source here. Some suspect that these are the two trees of Valinor, or one of the two trees, Laurelin it would be then, due to the golden light. However, it's difficult to explain in this video the exact meaning of these two trees, but let's say there was a time in the world where sun and moon weren't created yet, and then these two trees were one of the light sources of the world. And they are highly revered by the elves, so they're very important culturally for them. And I don't think, though, that this is the case, because if you look at a map of Aman, you see there's a gigantic mountain range between these trees and the ocean east of it. The trees are pretty much very far to the west, and there's a west continent called Aman, which we might mention multiple times. He mentioned Valar and Maiar are also living there, and the elves sail there when they leave Middle-earth, so it's a significance. And this scene here is, as a result, hard to put into context. If these are the two trees of Valinor, this must be the First Age. This makes no sense, though, because Galadriel, as we see here on this shot, it's actually Galadriel on the ship, does not sail west in the First Age. It simply is not working in the chronology. She sails maybe east, or she actually walks east, because the west continent, Aman, and Middle-earth are connected over like a frozen, icy wasteland in the far north. And in some versions, Galadriel travels to Middle-earth this way. There's one version where she goes to Middle-earth by ship, but if she goes to Middle-earth, she goes against the direction of the two trees, and as a result, can't look into the direction of it and sail into this direction, if that makes sense, west. So these, in my opinion, these are two big reasons why this light source can't be one of the trees. I assume it's the sun. My one speculation might be that after the destruction of the two trees of Valinor, they were destroyed by Morgoth, the master of Sauron, and the mother of Shelob, together in an interesting cooperation. And then out of their last fruit and last flower, sun and moon were created and set on a specific path, and they traveled from east to west. So it could be maybe the first sunrise or the first time the sun goes down, I don't know. Still, it is a problematic. If they look west, they would have to sail west, but Galadriel simply only sails west once, as we know from the books, and that is at the very end of The Lord of the Rings, when she goes back to Aman and sails west. At every other occasion, she potentially does not do so. And it's just not much mentioned that she sails at all, I guess. In the leaks of the show so far, it seems there is like the potential for her sailing to Numenor, and there she has to sail west to get there. So it could be this scene. There's another scene in the first teaser trailer, which we find, I hope I find it now. Pretty hard to find this little scene, this one here. And if you look at her clothes, it's also a white robe, and it looks relatively similar to what we see her wearing here. So maybe these scenes are connected. Maybe she sails to Numenor, then she has to go west. We see the sun in the west and the sundown. Maybe they are looking at Numenor or the birds, I don't know. And they get into a storm or something, the ship gets sunk, and she lands somehow on a raft with Halbrand is his name, which we also see indicated in the first trailer when they're on this raft here somewhere. I hope I find it fast. Yeah, here's Halbrand. And in this scene, we see two characters on the ship. It's pretty hard to see, though, but there are two of them on this boat. And it's supposed to be Halbrand and Galadriel. Quite interesting. But as said, we don't see Halbrand in the scene here. As a result, it seems a bit unusual that he is on the ship as well. So how do they met in the ocean when the ship sinks? It makes very little sense to me, to be honest. But I don't know. We have to find out, I guess, how this might work or not. What is also interesting, in the background, we see these women here. And it seems like either they have blonde hair or they have like a white veil over their head or something like this. And indeed, there is a scene where we see a big dining table, most likely in Lindon, where we also see some famous elves like Celebrimbor, Gil-galad, which we just discussed, and Elrond, and so on. And we also see several women there with these white veils. So maybe this might be related, and I could assume that Galadriel was maybe sent by Gil-galad to Numenor or to sail west. It seems very strange to me, because as said in the books, there are some versions where Galadriel is banned from sailing west at all. So it seems very unlikely that she even tries to leave Middle-earth to sail to Numenor, which is an island between the west continent and Aman and Middle-earth, to sail west and get even close to the side of Aman, because elves always have this desire to return. And Galadriel potentially, it's complicated with her desire to return to the west and so on, but it seems very strange to put her in a situation like this, and seems not really fitting to, if you consider the book. So I'm not sure about this. As said, it maybe is a flashback that she looks here at the first rising of the sun, and this is the east for whatever reason, and not the west. Also a possibility. It would maybe explain their wonder, though I think in the Silmarillion it's mentioned that the first time the sun rises, it rises in the west for a specific reason, due to it being created there and then goes up, basically. But yeah, it's tough to say where this is. Oh, it's a vision of the future where she sails back. Another theory I have here is that this man here in the background might be Celeborn, because in the other trailer we also see Galadriel climbing here. We see some persons also, it's hard to see here down, so she's climbing some icy mountain there, it seems, and then later in the trailer we see this ice troll and this man here. Maybe he is Celeborn, because she, in the Second Age, relatively early, they already have a child, Celebrian, later wife of Elrond, and I don't know. It would be strange if Celeborn is not around when Galadriel is there. It does not make really sense. So I assume he's also revealed later, but I could be wrong, I guess. So much to this scene. That was quite long an excursion here, but let us move on a little bit. We see the meteor again, and some also speculated that Galadriel might look at that, but it doesn't really seem like it here in these scenes, but I could be wrong. Then we have a very interesting character, Durin, and we have some writing here on this, let's call it a collar, and Durin is of course one of the dwarves, and the original Durin, Durin the First, or also called Durin the Deathless, was one of the 7 fathers of the dwarves, and these fathers, and especially Durin, is known for reincarnating at certain times, and then like a dwarf is born that is very similar in appearance and behavior, I guess, to Durin, and then he becomes the next Durin, and so he's called Durin the Deathless because he reincarnates, I guess. There's a hint that also that is true for the other 6 fathers of the dwarves, so there's that. And we know from this character that he is Durin the Fourth, which lived in the Second Age. So that makes totally sense. If we look at his collar, whatever it's called here, we see the letters in Kirs, or in this case actually dwarf runes. The system is then a bit modified. We see this letter here, which is an E. Actually, if these are two lines here, then it's a long E. It's hard to tell. We see an A. If it's 2 lines, it's a long A. But I assume it's just stylized and it's just a normal E and A. We see this letter here, which is a TH sound. And we have the L here, another E, and the S. And this here I can't think. Maybe it's another S or so. Hard to tell. And then in this case, I would assume this might actually mean deathless, because on the hammer there's a poster where we also see Durin the Fourth already without his face, and there on the hammer is also something written on it, and it reads like "Awake the Sleeping Stone," I think was the inscription on that. It was also in English, though written in Kirs, and you could argue, why is it written in modern English in dwarf runes? And a reason might be that the dwarves were very secretive about their own language, Khuzdur, and would only use it among their kin. So maybe this is his, I meet for diplomatic reasons elves or others out that are not dwarves, and as a result my writings on my clothes are all in the language they can read and not in Khuzdur. So you can make an argument at least for this. Also, there's very little words in Khuzdur we know from Tolkien. It's a very underdeveloped language. However, that would be the only word I could come up with. Seeing a Durin and seeing EATHLES, maybe deathless, would be what it means, and it's basically written Durin the Deathless on his collar. I'm not sure. Let's move on. Here, another very interesting scene with few very important details. We have here, very likely, hiking Gil-galad. We already talked about him. And this here, I suppose it's Elrond, but he also, from the color, looks like Celebrimbor, which we will see in this scene here. Here we see Elrond, and this man here is Celebrimbor. He forges the Rings of Power later, or it already did. It's hard to tell when exactly this plays, but he lived in the Second Age. Also, we see these 2 guards here. If we move back, we also see these guards here again, golden guards with spears. Quite interesting, and we see these white trees. Some speculate these might be Malorn trees. But according to the unfinished tales, they did not grow in Lindon. And I assume this is where Gil-galad is at home, because we see this bowl here, this gigantic soup bowl, and if we jump back to the other teaser trailer, I hope I find it here. Nope. Here we see the soup bowl and Gil-galad and these white trees here. And from another screenshot, we know it's in Lindon, And there in the background we also see these white trees. So I would assume it is the place where Gil-galad lives, which is, his realm is called Lindon, and there are the Grey Havens, which we also know from the end of The Lord of the Rings, that is in Elvish called Mithlond, and I assume it's somewhere in his realm. And this is like a ceremony, and we know, interestingly, we also see these guards here in the background, so they are definitely guards of Lindon, in my opinion. So that should be pretty clear. Not much else to say here. I really like the scenery, it looks very beautiful. Also like these lamps here, pretty cool. And this here, this structure, somewhat is very reminiscent of what we see in Rivendell later in the Peter Jackson films. Pretty cool. So what also I forgot to mention, they also do this head movement here. So it seems like they see the meteor as well. Seems pretty likely, right? Here on this scene, we talked at the beginning about the scene on the bridge here. Let me see if I find him with these two persons here. I assume it is these two here, which is Bronwyn and Arondir. And they also see the meteor. And they are a couple. There's like a romantic relationship between them. She also holds his hand here for a moment. And that is very unusual. I'm not the hugest fan of that because the relationship between elves and men is very rare and very special. And they just use it for characters that we don't know from the books. That seems unusual. There are very rare instances where this is the case. For example, the princes of Dol Amros, they have like ancestors, or one of their ancestors was a man called Imrazir, and he married an elven woman, Mithrelas, and they are from this line, but that is also Third Age stuff. Then we have, of course, Elrond and his ancestors, where we suddenly see a lot of half-elven, like Elrond and his father Earendil and his mother Elwing and so on. And that is a very powerful and important bloodline inside the world. So it seems very strange to me that they would implement a relationship like this. Feels a bit forced, to be honest, but I don't know. If we move further into the trailer, we see the tower again. We already discussed this scene. And then we see a new character. This is Miriel, or maybe, depending on the timeline, Tar Miriel, which is then the ruling queen of Numenor. And Numenor, to explain what Numenor is an island between the west continent, Aman, and Middle-earth. And on this island dwell the Dúnedain, the men of the West, like Aragorn's ancestors, if you want to go very far back into the history. And how this island came to be, it was a gift to a specific group of men, the Edain, from the First Age. The Edain was a group originally from the east of Middle-earth, and they wandered to the west coast because Morgoth, a shadow, fell upon them in the east, and they escaped from there and tried to go to blessed lands. And the west coast was bigger in the First Age at some point, and there was a land called Beleriand. There the elves also had their realms, that the Noldor, that returned to Middle-earth. And they went into the service of these elves and fought with them against Morgoth, and also in the end, in the War of Wrath, where Morgoth was defeated and thrown into the void, they also had a part in this. And after it, they were rewarded with their own island, a place to dwell where they could be in peace, and was created, as said, between Aman and Middle-earth, in the middle of the ocean. And then the elves brought them by ships onto this island. And due to their contact with the elves before in Beleriand, in Middle-earth, and also with the elves from Aman sometimes visiting them on this island and bring them gifts and knowledge, they just could really boom there. They could really increase their knowledge and develop very well. And they became like this high developed society that had huge knowledge and crafts and so on. And they at some point also developed the ability again to build ships that were able to sail back to Middle-earth, and then they created settlements there. They also got, for example, control of Umbar. Maybe they built Umbar themselves. Complicated topic what they exactly did where. But the point is, these were now the Dúnedain, the men of the West. beyond this island, which they originally called Elena, which means starwards, because when they sailed there, they had to follow a star, the star of Earendil, the father of star, like the father of Elrond, you could say, became a star in the sky, and they had to follow that. It's more complicated. Like he's on his ship, and he has a Silmaril. He glows there, and you can see him as a star in the sky. However, these Númenóreans, the Dúnedain, also got their lifespan restored to what it was originally before the fall of man. You could also say it just got longer, and that is why, for example, Aragorn lives so long. Like one of the first kings of Númenor lived for like 500 years. Aragorn, I think, around 210 years. So a very long lifespan compared to all the other men. And this, of course, also gives them the opportunity to just make a lot of things in their lives and gain a lot of knowledge in their lives. And as a result, they became so advanced. In some writings, Númenor even had like airships and stuff. So Tolkien just toned it down and said, no, that's probably a bit too much. And they're just very insanely advanced compared to men in Middle-earth, and very comparable to when it comes to their knowledge to the elves, I would say. So this is then Númenor. What speaks for this being Númenor? We have this shield here in the background. You see the sun symbol. If we go back to teaser number 1, we see the sun symbol here as well. And this place, I discussed it already. I don't want to go into detail here anymore, but this is Rōmena, in my opinion, one of the big harbor cities of Númenor. It's not the capital, but pretty much the next big thing to the capital was a big harbor city on the east side of the island facing Middle-earth. And we have this, the reason for that is we have the position of the mountain. If you look at the shadows and the cardinal directions, you can come to this conclusion that this here must be east of the mountain. We have this island, which might be Tol Uinen, and this lighthouse, which might be then Calmindon, I think is the name. We have some descriptions of this, and this is kind of fitting. So for me, that is most likely Númenor. And yeah, we see the shield here. We see the symbol on the shield, so this must be on Númenor. And it was always speculated that this actress here plays Miriel, so that makes complete sense, in my opinion. Else, there's not much to say. We see, as said, this fire here in the background, this oven, I would call it, maybe it's a smithy or something. So it seems like she's more in the streets of some big city in Númenor than in the palace. And some speculated these flowers here that we see might be the flowers of the white tree of Númenor, which was called Nimloth. But in my opinion, that's then unlikely if she is just in the streets of the city, because the tree stands in the gardens of the palace, not in just anywhere in the city. So it seems unusual. Maybe it's very far away. And she also, as said, looks up a little bit. We have in the leaked teaser trailer, we have a shot from above, and she clearly looks up there. So it's possible that she also sees this meteor here. But yeah, it's hard to tell. Else, there's not much to explain here. That is Tar Miriel, and she will be one of the last rulers of Númenor. There's only one ruler after her, basically, and then the story arc of Númenor will end, and things will change, and Gondor and Arnor will be founded in Middle-earth as Númenorian kingdoms in exile, you could say. And that's basically the story here. We also see this tree in the background with some fruit. Hard to tell what it is. But I'm very interested to see what's going on in Númenor. If we move further, we see the meteor here again. This shot we already somewhat saw in the first trailer. It was cut basically here, I think. Which the camera movement just stopped here. It was also a bit further zoomed out in the other trailer. I'm not sure if I can find the scene. I really forgot where the scene here might be. Here, this one. If you see this scene, it's basically the same. And here, something is missing in this scene, though, in the first teaser. And they added this in the new teaser. We see something is different. It's the same shot. It's the same scene here. And we see now 3 trees. And if we move the footage a bit, we see them moving. And ends confirmed. There was a big discussion when Amazon released a little... I know Lord of the Rings needs more readers teaser trailer a bit for promoting stuff, and there we saw Ents in it, and they looked really good in this trailer. So I would argue, some argued that they didn't make it just for the trailer. It's a hint that this is in the Rings of Power show, and this here pretty much confirms it. There were some other voices who said, hey, maybe what we saw on the armor of Arondir in one of the posters that were released initially looks like could be an Ent or so, and yeah, it seems to be, it really was an Ent, and we see definitely Ents in the show. How big their role is hard to say. We know Treebeard was around in the Second Age, that is for sure. Here we see maybe these are Huorns and not Ents, hard to tell. This here looks more like a little Ent, maybe an Enting, and beyond that, there's not much to say. The Ents didn't have, to my knowledge, a big role in the Second Age, except for the Ents of Fangorn losing their Entwives. And this also happens at the very end of the Second Age, according to a letter of Tolkien, where the Entwives lived like further east of Fangorn, and then when the army of the Last Alliance advanced, Sauron burned this land there, and the Entwives were lost. He speculates that maybe some Entwives were captured by Sauron, and he used them to grow crops in his lands to feed his armies. But it's really hard to tell. Like, it's just an idea, a suggestion of Tolkien. How fleshed out that was in Tolkien's mind is pretty hard to tell, but I think this is one of the few mentions of Ents in the Second Age. So if they play a role, their role will be quite minor and hidden. And maybe this is similar to what we see to the group of people we already discussed, the Hobbits, because their role must also be hidden and very isolated. And I think showrunners also commented on that this might be the case in the show, that they have like their little own story that is a bit at the side of everything else, but maybe distantly connected. Really hard to tell. We know though that Nori here, we know her from the first teaser trailer already. It's her. And she sees this meteor crash. She tries to move up her hand to cover her eyes, I guess. And sees the explosion. So we see this long travel of the meteor. Everybody looks up, and here it ends. And she sees where it lands. And we know from the other teaser trailer, I hope I find the scene. Here it is. No, here. That this is Nori, and somebody comes out of this crashed meteor, it seems, and he is titled the Stranger, or often called Meteor Man, or Meteorite Man, and he grabs her arm, and then we see fire here, and we see the fire moving around them, quite mysterious. We already discussed this in the other breakdown. I don't really like this, because an entity surviving the crash of a meteor would be insanely powerful. It can only be one of these angelic beings, one of the Maiar, for example. It could also be a Valar, but that for me would be insanely unlikely. And as I said, there are a few of these very powerful beings during the First Age there, but we made jokes on the Discord and on the chat during the live stream. They usually don't travel by meteor. Like, that is not a thing in Tolkien's world. That seems insanely off, in my opinion, and not the hugest fan of that. The problem is, as said, only like a supernatural being can survive this, and there are not that many left. So some, and me included, speculate this might be Sauron. There's one little detail in the leaked teaser that hints at this. We will discuss this maybe when the teaser comes out officially, the next one. It might be Sauron. That's my idea. Like, who else could it be? It could be a Balrog maybe, but that makes no sense because the Balrogs be hidden. Like, this meteor was seen by everyone and it crashed, and the Balrogs were hiding and being somewhat in slumber, I guess, until their master Morgoth returns, and not like coming in a really flashy way into Middle-earth and then go into hiding. I don't know, that seems strange. And depending on when this is in the Second Age, it also makes no sense, because they went into hiding right after the end of the First Age, after they lost the War of Wrath. And we all know one of the Balrogs in hiding that got awoken by the dwarves, which is Durin's Bane. But this year, I don't know. the other possibility some people suggested were it is one of the Istari, one of the wizards. There are 2 wizards coming to Middle-earth in the Second Age in one very late writing of Tolkien at least, though usually they come during the Third Age. So the wizards, of course, still lived, like Saruman, Gandalf, Radagast, and the 2 blue wizards already lived in the Second Age and lived on Aman, but they were not in Middle-earth, and this is most likely Middle-earth. I assume, looking at this wood here, it is maybe Fangorn or it's Greenwood the Great, which is later called Mirkwood when Sauron infests it in the Third Age. Really hard to tell where it is exactly, though. We will find out, I guess. And yeah, that are pretty much the candidates. There's also Glorfindel, a very powerful elf that some Maiar also see as equal after he died and killed a Balrog. He died in this process and was re-embodied later, as elves do when they die in Aman. And then he got also empowered, and Maiar saw him as equal. But I don't think he would come to Middle-earth by meteor. And he didn't. The person here in the meteor also doesn't look like an elf, I guess. Maybe. Hard to tell, to be honest. He has a beard, and that is very unusual for elves, except the very old elves like Círdan. So that is very unlikely that it's Glorfindel. And we know from, for example, The Lord of the Rings, Appendix A, there's a mention how Gandalf, maybe it was also B, there's a mention that Gandalf comes to the havens of Mithlond, and Círdan recognize him and his natures and where he might have come from, and gifts him his ring, elven ring of power, Narya. This indicates that the Istari came to Middle-earth by ship and not by meteor. So that is then the most likely explanation for this. Also, when it's a blue wizard, we only have 1 person and not 2. Worst case scenario for me would be it's like a green wizard that they were just invented for the show or something like that. That would be terrible in my opinion. You should be very careful with these insanely powerful entities from like these angelic beings. In my opinion, I hope they don't overdo this. But as said, my bet would be on Sauron. It would maybe fit because he's very important for the Second Age. There must be Sauron. We haven't seen him yet. If we move further, we come to this. It is a German trailer here. It says Die Ringe der Macht, the Rings of Power, der Herr der Ringe, the Lord of Rings. Die Reise begins. The journey begins. Yeah, here we see the last shot of the trailer, and then we are hopefully done in, I wouldn't say it's a reasonable amount of time, but the shortest I could do. And I tried this a few times, I have to admit. So this is most likely Numenor. If you look at the ship here and look at the ship at the start, we see a similar design and these sails look very similar. Same here with the other ships in the first teaser here in the background. The design looks distantly similar to this last shot here. So it's a Numenorian ship, it seems, from the design of the show. We see some heads carved into the stone here, and this river valley. Hard to say where it is in Numenor. We see this Zeus-like statue where water's coming out of his hands, it seems, and we see some horses. The Numenorians really loved horses, but according to Unfinished Tales, they did not use horses in war only as messengers, light cavalry. Not light cavalry. They had some messengers on horses. They were light and fast, but what was not like they had huge cavalries and attacked with those in war. That was not the style. Like, it was a sea nation, and they had very powerful foot troops and maybe, I don't know, some other siege machines or something like this. Who knows? They were pretty advanced. That is thinkable, but it's definitely stated by Tolkien in Unfinished Tales that they did not use horses for war. So this reflects maybe that Numenor likes their horses. Maybe it's like a reference or so to something which I don't recognize now here. Maybe this is Orome, and I don't know, it's one of his legendary horses, his own horse Nahar, which with golden hooves, I think is the English word. Really hard to tell who this might be. These might be kings of the past. There are quite a lot in Numenor. If we have Tar-Miriel as one of the last rulers, this would be very late in the Second Age, but as said, there are hints at that they go for huge time compression because, for example, Celebrimbor and Tar Miriel, let's say their main events surrounding these characters are like 1,600 years apart. Like, quite a lot apart. Like, there's a huge difference in times of more than 1,000 years between them. Like, almost 2,000 years. It's really big, and if you see them in parallel, in events happening in parallel, you definitely notice this show just mashed everything together by a huge margin. Like, a huge margin. It is, and I'm very skeptical of this approach, to be honest, though I can understand it in parts because the Second Age has a lot of blank pages and we have a lot of time in it, and having men in the show that only live like 100, even if they live 200-300 years, it's just too little often. You would have, like, I don't know, every episode a new character, I don't know, that has to be introduced, or every season, and the cast has to be replaced because they just died of old age, at least when it comes to men, while the elves just live on forever. It's a huge problem in an adaptation if you want to cover all these events, but still very skeptical because it goes completely against what Tolkien wrote. It's unfortunate in my opinion, but maybe they can make it work somehow. It was somewhat similar in Lord of the Rings, though there it was just like 17 years cutting out where not much happened anyway, so that worked. But yeah, these heads, most likely kings. This here remembers, is a bit reminiscent of one of the, for me at least, one of the heads of the Argonauts from the films of Peter Jackson. Else there's not much to say. I don't know if this is Romena or maybe something else. It could also be, there's also a river going up to the capital of Numenor, could be there. Pretty hard to tell where it is exactly. In the front we also see one of the statues. We see some white birds here. I really like the details though. Very curious to see more of Numenor. So that was the trailer. The next one comes out at 14th of July. So very soon already. And we will look into this when it comes out. Maybe I do a video on this without footage or so, give you some thoughts. But I think I would just wait till the trailer officially releases and maybe be more prepared then. That would be my approach. So I hope you enjoyed this short breakdown. Thank you for watching, and see you people, I would say, next time. Before we end, just a few hints as always. If you enjoyed this trailer breakdown here, leave a like, a comment if you want, maybe subscribe to the channel. I have a lot of lore content here that is very in detail, and currently working on a video about Elrond that will be in its end, I don't know, 7-8 hours long. Well, it's already 7 hours long. Currently covering the Third Age in like 20 to 27 minute parts. And we are in I just released part 7, so next will be part 8. I work on that already. Not sure when it releases, this old trailer analysis and stuff, and I don't know, just pushed me a little bit back in my schedule, so the Who is Elrond video part 8 comes out later. It will cover the events after the fall of Minas Ithil and the fall of Moria, so look forward to this. We're slowly getting to the last beats of the Third Age, so slowly coming to an end. Very looking forward when it's done. I put a playlist in the description so you can see my best videos. Like I have one called Recommended Videos. It's pretty good stuff in there if you're interested in Tolkien lore. Beyond that, I don't know. As said, when 14th of July, I will do a stream again and we will go frame by frame through the trailer, and it will be a couple of hours long, I guess. Maybe shorter, and discuss everything in detail. Maybe we get some new insights until then. Quite interesting. I might also do a freestyle video like this. I would be very I would really appreciate if people would post some comments on how they like this freestyle format here, because I can produce this much faster than a scripted video. The downside is I can't have subtitles because I don't have a script here that I can use to generate subtitles for YouTube. So I'm sorry for all the people who are a bit relying on the subtitles. This was just me going through everything and in the trailer just on the fly and recording it somewhat live. It, as said, really helps quite a lot to accelerate the process of video creating, just writing a script down, recording it, screwing it up, recording it again. It's a long process and takes a bit of time to do it this way, and I just want to test out if I could do this somewhat freestyle, though I also had some multiple tries to make this video, to be honest, but in the end, I hope it worked out for you and was kind of interesting. Maybe I have to practice my free speech abilities a little bit, because that is definitely not that easy for me. Is there anything else? Well, I also must produce gaming content, and maybe I also do like a freestyle video like this for the German channel, maybe when the next teaser comes out, so we have every information gathered there at once, and I make a German version of this, because I guess my free speaking in German is a bit better than in English. We will find out when I maybe do it, because I really have very little time to do much other content. My focus is really on this. I really want to complete Who is Elrond before the show comes out, maybe make a bigger video before, like maybe about Galadriel. That would be also a bigger project. I'm not sure if I can do it till September, so as you can imagine, these videos take a lot of time, but I start rambling here again. As said, don't forget the YouTube things. Maybe check my Twitter if you want to have news when I go live and post new videos or so. There's now also an Instagram account where I also post like little things and hints at where something might appear on my YouTube channel, which is the main focus. I also stream games at Twitch. Currently we play a bit of Raft, which is very relaxing, fantastic little game where you have a raft and are on a world that is covered in water, like everything is ocean with only small islands, and you have to just expand your raft and find out what is going on. Pretty cool game, like it a lot of fun, and I hope I find some time to play that. So again, thank you people for watching. I wish you a fantastic rest of the day. Thank you for all your support, and see you next time. Goodbye.